Flame War doesn't shake at the sight of the Titan, but she does shake with anger when she sees the Wrecker who killed Cannonball and nearly killed her, Rodimus.
Go beyond! Plus!
Hey, what's up Beyonders? This is James and we are back at it again with Shattered Glass covering issue 4. I'm sorry it's been so long. I think it's been a month or so since I uploaded a video. I apologize to you all a few times in the community posts, but again, I apologize for taking so long. Also, Trace Stefan, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. If you are watching this, let me know how the levels were for the intro and outro of this video. I didn't forget about you, my friend. Alright, so for this issue, I'm going to do the flashbacks first because we have quite a few. So the first one here occurs as the war between the heroic Decepticons and evil Autobot autocrats began to rage on Cybertron. This battle here is for the Titan's Net. Now the Titan's Net is something IDW created within the Transformers universe. It's Cybertron's global network that allows these bots that are called city speakers, who are Transformers who master the ability to communicate and control the Titans. Specifically, the Titan Defense Fleet, which is a fleet of Titans that are massive starships stationed in Cybertron's orbit. They protected Cybertron and were sent wherever else they were needed in the galaxy. As the battle takes place, we see Soundwave and Flame War enter the fray. Now, Flame War in the Shatterglass universe is a part of the Decepticon pirate crew called the Rising Sea, and I love that name so much. And their captain is Cannonball. We learned from her inner monologue that the Decepticons at some point were able to take the Titan's Net from the Autobots. Instead of trying to take it back, the Autobots are here to destroy it. The attack is led by Windblade and her City Crashers, who are known as Titan Killers. Once Flame War and Soundwave enter the control room, they see Rodimus is squeezing the head of one of Soundwave's mini cassettes, Frenzy. Cannonball orders them to stay back, assuring them that he's got Rodimus, but Rodimus throws Frenzy right into his face. Before we go any further into this battle, I want to point out what Cannonball and Flame War have in common, which is they both made their first appearances in Fun Publications' Transformers Timelines. Flame War's first appearance was in Timelines issue number 1, Descent into Evil. It's a pre-Beast Wars story where she was one of the last Decepticons and was an agent of the Tripredacus Council, just like Ravage was in the Beast Wars show. Cannonball appeared in a tech story called The Dark Heart of Sandokan. I hope I pronounced that correctly. It honestly sounds like something out of the Dune books. In that universe, he was also a Decepticon pirate captain. His crew manned the Decepticon pirate warship, the Sea Slag. Now back to the battle. It's initially 3-on-1, and Rodimus can hold his own even outnumbered. He isn't alone for long though, because Windblade ambushes Cannonball and throws him at Soundwave. As Flame War and Rodimus battle, Cannonball warns her she can't take him on. Though she gains the upper hand in their fight, that doesn't last long. Rodimus grabs her leg and slams her body against the wall, completely taking her out of the fight. Before he can land a killing blow, Cannonball stops him and tells Flame War to go. Though we don't see it, Flame War implies, and even later in the story states, that Rodimus killed Cannonball. She says in her inner monologue that she doesn't know whether the blow Rodimus gave her or watching this moment broke her. Sometime later, we see the Rising Sea crew in this bar having a memorial for Cannonball. Like all memorials, they're reminiscing about the good days until Megatron interrupts, wishing to extend his condolences. As Megatron explains how Cannonball and him didn't differ much, they only argued about the methods to fight the war. This is where Cannonball's death gets confusing because Flame War gives another account of how he died in her inner monologue. She says as their ship, the Rising Sea, was exploding, Cannonball shoved her and the crew into escape pods, and his last words to them were they had to live and rise from the rubble. Let me know what you guys think, because just like the first issue focusing on Ultra Magnus, the flashbacks here were jumbled around, so you kind of had to like figure it out and put it in order. So maybe I missed something. Megatron offers the Rising Sea crew a place in the Decepticon movement. Initially, he believes Slipstream is the crew's leader, until Flame War asks what's the job. Slipstream reveals that she is the leader, but the crew goes where Flame War goes. The next flashback actually continues the flashback from Shatterglass issue 2 in the first series, where we saw the final battle on Earth take place between the Decepticons and the Autobots. During the battle, Megatron had ordered Starscream and the Seekers to gather all the Decepticons they could and get off Earth, while he sacrificed himself to buy them as much time as possible. Flame War wasn't happy about it and looked at it as Starscream betraying Megatron. She didn't care to hear anything Starscream had to say. She didn't care that it was ordered by Megatron, because in her mind, it was like losing Cannonball all over again. We then go into more present day. This is after Blaster's raid on Kaon, which took place in the issue 2 of this current series. We saw him use his sonic abilities that caught Flame War and the Rising Sea crew off guard, and the blast smashed through a wall, allowing him to escape. As the Rising Sea crew is fixing the wall, Flame War is angry that Megatron hasn't ordered her and the crew to strike the Autobots before they can activate Metroplex. Even though Slipstream reminds her that Megatron is being cautious, Flame War argues that Cannonball wouldn't have sat back and waited. She says, "We're rebels. We're the crew of the Rising Sea. We're not Constructicons." Her passionate speech successfully convinces the crew to strike with her. They transform and speed toward the static zone. As Flame War says, the sea rises again. This leads us to where we left off in the last issue, with the Rising Sea heading towards the Wreckers. However, in this issue, we see Metroplex is with the Wreckers, which shouldn't be possible. Let me explain. We saw half of his body was still deep beneath the ground in the last issue. Also, Slicer got Goldbug away from Metroplex, where they got into a fight with the Airstrike Patrol, and lured Jetfire to their position. He planned to take Goldbug out and test his theory on how close Jetfire has to be to activate Metroplex. Since we know there's no time gap between issues, Metroplex magically being here really doesn't make any sense. Now, why he is activated and moving does get explained in the final issue. I think Danny Lore, who is writing this, is playing it fast and loose here because of the limited number of issues they have to finish this series. It's just a thing that happens in the world of comics, which I understand, so please don't take my criticism as me bashing the comic. Now back to the battle. Flame War doesn't shake at the sight of the Titan, but she does shake with anger when she sees the Wrecker who killed Cannonball and nearly killed her, Rodimus. Despite Slipstream trying to warn her to be cautious, to devise a plan and not charge recklessly into battle, Flame War ignores her and charges toward Rodimus. As the Wreckers take Jetfire into Metroplex, Rodimus takes notice of Flame War. Before he heads toward her, he tries to order Slicer not to make Jetfire comfortable, but Slicer reminds him he's in charge while Ultra Magnus preps for Ratchet's procedure. Now remember this because we will see more about that later. Now the fight between Rodimus and Flame War comes across as more evenly matched than their past fight. She's holding her own against him. Hailstorm tries to back her up by firing one of his rockets, but Hailstorm forgets he's dealing with someone who's quick on the draw. Rodimus fires at him and boom, down goes Hailstorm in a flash. Flame War, enraged, leaps onto Rodimus' shoulders, bashing his head until Slipstream flies over and grabs her. Slipstream tries to get her out of there, but Flame War refuses. She forces herself out of Slipstream's arms, diving down towards Rodimus as he fires his blaster and wrist cannon at her. But before she can even hit the ground, one of his blasts knocks her out. Later, she awakens inside Metroplex, handcuffed alongside Optimus Prime. So after beating the brakes off him, it seems Ultra Magnus has had him a prisoner this entire time. Now, remember what Slicer said earlier about Magnus getting ready for Ratchet's procedure? It involves Optimus Prime. Now, Flame War wonders why she is still alive, and Slicer informs her she will be used as a bargaining chip. Initially, she thinks they also captured Soundwave, but then she realizes it's just his radio coming from Blaster's head. She quickly deduces Slicer must have done that to Blaster, and she doesn't understand why he or the Wreckers would do that to their own. This is where Slicer explains how the Wreckers operate, and I like it a lot. He says the Wreckers care about the wrecking more than anything else. If Ultra Magnus told us to turn our guns against each other, we'd all enjoy the slaughter. So to no surprise, the Wreckers are a bunch of psychopaths, which is fitting. This harkens back to the last issue where we learn Slicer looks at being a Wrecker as a job. He doesn't fight for someone else or have a purpose like Jetfire. The Wreckers don't view each other as teammates or brother in arms, so they won't fight hard for each other like the Decepticons. They don't believe in some great cause or follow Ultra Magnus because they fear him. They do respect his intelligence, but at the end of the day, he pays them. He gives them a job that allows them to wreck and ruin. Now, Flame War tries to get more information from Slicer on Ratchet's procedure, but he refuses to give up any details. Slipstream, having successfully snuck into Metroplex, gets the jump on Slicer and is able to get the keys for Flame War's shackles. They both begin to take the fight to Slicer, but even though it's 2-on-1, he's still a wrecker at the end of the day, so they know they need to be cautious. They gain the upper hand in the fight when Flame War grabs Blaster's head, threatening to destroy it. That's something I want you guys to take note of. Why has Slicer become so attached to Blaster's head that he hesitates on taking them both out? She asks Slicer again about Ratchet's procedure on Ultra Magnus. The only details he gives is he says maybe the boss wants to see how he looks in Optimus's colors in the mirror. Initially, I thought the procedure was Ratchet stripping Optimus of his frame while still being alive and attaching it to Ultra Magnus. Let's just say in the final issue, I don't know if that scenario is more messed up than the one we end up getting. It's crazy. Slicer leaps towards Slipstream, trying to grab her and use her as a hostage, but he isn't fast enough. Flame War blasts him in the chest before he can do it. What bothered me here is the blast is so strong that it blows Slicer back into a wall within Metroplex that breaks on impact and has him fly out. I feel like that shouldn't be possible because, for example, in Autocracy, we saw Metroplex, who just like this one was asleep for many cycles, take a blast from the Van Park Annihilator that unleashes a powerful beam, and it didn't even scratch his armor. I couldn't even find an image in this issue or in past issues depicting maybe the wall's structure to be damaged already. Unless they're trying to say Metroplex is weak on the inside? It's not a big deal, it's just weird to me. Slipstream tells Flame War they should leave, but she knows she is not leaving until she gets her revenge on Rodimus. However, at that moment, Flame War is frozen. She doesn't know what to do. She thinks about how she could stay and fight him. Even if she died in the process, in her eyes, it would still be worth it. But she then thinks about Slicer's words, about how the Wreckers operate. They don't care about each other as the Decepticons do, as she and the crew do. She then remembers her last conversation with Slipstream, and this conversation probably takes place before Blaster's raid. Flame War is thinking about Cannonball, that if he were still around, they would be out there fighting. Slipstream agrees and mentions he knew the Rising Sea crew better than anyone. Slipstream reveals to Flame War that Cannonball believed she could be a great leader if she didn't let her anger blind her so much, because in those moments, she doesn't know the difference between a leader and a martyr. Initially, Flame War doesn't understand what she means. Slipstream explains, when you're not focused on avenging Cannonball or thinking about what he would do, when you're yourself focused on the present and the crew, that's when you're most like him. Wherever you go, I go. I'd just like to follow my captain again one of these days. I love this conversation because at that moment, Flame War realizes that her vengeance blinded her so much that she forgot why Cannonball died and forgot about her purpose. If she ran after Rodimus, Slipstream would most likely die, as Hailstorm did, just like the last time she ran off to get revenge. In her mind, she would be just like Slicer, a bot with no real crewmates. Cannonball died so they could live, and Megatron stayed on Earth so they could escape to fight another day. If she died right now, who would tell Megatron about Ultra Magnus's plan? So like them, like a true leader, she's going to sacrifice her revenge for the betterment of her crewmates. She says in her inner monologue, killing Rodimus would be sweet revenge, but there's plenty of revenge to get on the battlefield. What we see next is Megatron, Soundwave, and the rest of the Decepticon forces battling the Wreckers and Metroplex. That's the end of the video. Besides the fast and loose parts of this story, I liked it overall, but let me know what you guys think. I am gonna get that final issue of this series out as fast as I can. Other than that though, in the meantime, if you want to join our journey covering the Transformers IDW timeline, check out the playlist right here. Or if you want to see one of the last series from IDW, check out my Transformers The Last Spot Standing full story video. Other than that, have an awesome day, take care, and always remember every day to transform and go beyond. See you later, my friends.